Hey guys, so before I get into this, I want to say that if this is a topic that is at all an issue for you, just don't watch it because we're going to be talking about some things that involve alcohol. And so if that's something that you're trying not to think about, then just don't watch because we got to talk about this. But the other things I want to say is I don't think this is something that happens to every single person, but it is something that I've observed in a lot of people. And on this trip, since I have had a few drinks here or there, I've seen some physical effects that I want to talk about because I think I may have stumbled across a connection between toxic ritualistic behaviors, particularly binge, and alcoholism. Okay. Which I will refer to as basically, I don't know. I don't have a clever euphemism. I guess I'm going to have to just say drinking. So basically, oh my goodness, when it comes to this connection, just know that a lot of it, it's my opinion, it's my theories, it's something that I have, like I said, observed and experienced on this trip, as I usually don't ever drink. And this was the first time in a long time where I had some, like one or two a day for like a few days. And so I'm not talking about anything like super crazy or hardcore. I'm talking about just the physical side of it and how it could lead to something bigger within the toxic ritualistic cycle. And I think that this can happen, particularly in the mids. And I've seen it a lot in people that have gotten bariatric surgery. It is observed. And I want to offer my perspective as somebody who has lost a lot of weight, what could be part of the reasoning behind it, as there can be a comorbidity aspect. But in my opinion, if somebody was hugely huge and had these toxic ritualistic behaviors, I think that that is ultimately the root of the use of drinking. Because, like with other things, people will use other stuff to support their toxic ritualistic behaviors. And I think in terms of binge, this is something that happens when it comes to drinking. Okay? Because one of the first things that I will say is it does increase your appetite quite a bit. So like I said, I was having, I had a couple drinks every day. Nothing too crazy, but I have basically no tolerance because I never do. And I think there is a genetic component in my family where it's very, powerful, I guess you could say. I know my mom is definitely a lightweight. I am too, and I think it's genetic. So I think there is just something to that as well, which there is a component there in terms of what, which, like I said, I think I said this, but if this is something you're trying not to think about, then I don't want you to watch this, okay? But when it comes to this issue, I think it would happen if drinking had a particularly strong effect. I don't think this happens with people who it doesn't really affect them that much, or they're kind of heavyweight and that, that sort of thing. I think it's a very particular type of person as well. I think there's some personality components. I think being highly emotional would put you more at risk for somewhat of a transfer, even though I don't think it's exactly a transfer, which is what I want to talk about. Okay? I think it's still the toxic ritualistic. It's just something used to support that. And I want to say why. And I think a lot of this is subconscious, and I think a lot of it is hormonal. And so I want to talk about it. So what happened? Well, when you drink, you tend to have less inhibitions. And people often think about serotonin as a feel-good hormone. But serotonin is actually more of a inhibition hormone and a hormone of satisfaction. So you have to kind of change the way you think about it. It's not that you feel good, it's that you feel satisfied or demotivated, or you feel basically motivated to stop. So even like high levels of serotonin, you can feel disgusted. You can feel a sense of disgust because it's like, oh gosh, I'm really full. That type of feeling. Which there are, if you do your research, if you look at serotonin in the brain, it usually has to do with somebody not eating anymore. You know, it makes them not want to eat. Like they get full, basically. Creates a feeling of satiety. Like I said, it's a satisfaction hormone. However, it is complicated as serotonin has different roles peripherally, so throughout the body. It's different than in the brain. But I don't want to get too into it. What we're talking about is serotonin signaling in the brain, which in my opinion is impaired or less strong within drinking. Obviously. I mean, hello. Everybody always talks about how when you drink, you have less inhibition. I think that this is one of the methods that it happens. Within the toxic ritualistic world, BINGE, there is going to be already some kind of injuring to these mechanisms in your brain as you typically take part in behaviors that push yourself past certain cues. I have to be kind of careful of how I talk about it. But basically, as you know, you are, we'll just say, overdoing it a lot, habitually, over many years at times. And I think that it does kind of break that system a bit in the brain. And it causes you to, when you do get out of that and you start to lose the weight, you must repair that system. And it can take quite a while. It can take years. And I also do believe that obesity in and of itself has an influence on serotonin and dopamine receptors and balance in the brain in particular, which is where you see a lot of people as they lose weight, as you get towards lower levels of obesity or the mids, or, you know, small fat with how we talk about it in terms of socially, you reach a point where your serotonin and dopamine balance is really off and you start to feel very, very bored, extremely bored. And I think a lot of reasons for this are because you're not like really struggling health-wise. Like I think when you're really, really, really big, your brain is highly stimulated because it's trying to keep you alive. It's a very stressful state to be in, so it's hard to be bored ever, really, at that size. But as you go down in levels, it can be understimulating. And there are, again, you can research it, it shows that within obesity, your dopamine receptors are lower in the brain, and they do repair with a caloric deficit over time. It repairs at least a little bit. So basically, all this to say, I think that a huge part of why this crossover happens is because of boredom. I think boredom is so major. And I think too, as your serotonin dopamine receptors start to recover, especially the serotonin ones, it can cause a feeling of very high serotonin in the brain, which can lead to feelings of shame, depression, disgust. So like you have less of an appetite, whether that would be with food or sexually. You have more inhibitions, right? You feel more satisfied, so you feel less motivated to do anything, basically. And it can be maddening. You know, before I was coming on this trip, I was so bored. I was reaching new levels of boredom, especially as I was getting healthier. And my lack of internal dialogue, my lack of internal emotions, or like having such a lesser level of it, which again, there are emotional people which I think are particularly vulnerable for this, we're used to having a lot of emotional stimulation, and when that starts to go away, it can feel very empty and scary and weird and just boring, just plain naked boredom. And so I think that leads to a lot of thrill-seeking behaviors in certain people. I think there is a stereotype of a small fat person going out and partying and stuff, and that type of thing, even like mid-size. There is this kind of stereotype of like the party girl, kind of thing. And I think that that's partly why, and certainly a party guy too, party boy too, or a lot of times there's these stereotypical experiences where people lose a large amount of weight and then they start hooking up with a lot of people and doing things that they typically wouldn't do. And I think that those stereotypes exist particularly for the reason of the boredom. And so I think that it's within that boredom, it becomes very dangerous to use drinking, we will say. 1 second. Let me just pause. Okay, sorry about that. I got a call. But yeah, so I was just saying that I think that boredom aspect, both external boredom and internal boredom, particularly if you're more extroverted, obviously you'll have a more extroverted boredom. So it's like, I don't feel like I'm going out enough, I'm not doing enough. Or more introverted boredom, where it's like, I feel like my internal experience is so much less stimulating than it used to be. That could put you at risk for a type of transfer to drinking. And I think that the sort of biological mechanism by which it happens is when I had something to drink, that feeling of understimulation and boredom, it went away. And I think it's because I was so bored because my serotonin signaling is so strong, which one of the aspects of that is that my appetite is lower, which is good. I know I'm technically in the mids socially, but in the United States, but I am still overweight and I'm still not completely healthy. And the body does not want to be overweight. The body does not. I do not accept that narrative, because otherwise I wouldn't feel a sense of disgust like I do pretty often. And like I have throughout weight loss, this feeling of disgust comes up a lot, and it's because your body just does not want to eat as much. Your body's like, no, stop, because you're overweight. So basically, over the last few days, I was having 1 or 2 drinks or whatever, and my appetite skyrocketed during that time. But at the same time, I wasn't as bored, and I had this kind of, it's very timely because I just saw Charlie, but it kind of made me have this feeling of like everything is romantic. Makes you kind of romanticize everything, because it's like, oh my gosh, like you just feel kind of better. And I think it's because it does blunt that serotonin response. And so you feel more alive, or you feel better, more stimulated by everything, and everything's fun and funny and all this stuff. Because it's not like I was blasted. I wasn't. I was just a little turned up. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't anything crazy, because I'm not going to do all that. And I don't like that feeling that much at all. But I do like the feeling of being kind of turned. And I mean, I was not like, being super conservative with it either. Like, I did have a couple, I was like definitely feeling it, you know what I mean? But even throughout the day and stuff, like the next day and all these things, like I would still feel that kind of feeling of like everything is romantic and I can just eat and eat and eat so much easier after having that. And I knew it was affecting me hormonally too, because I was breaking out, having like a lot of breakouts throughout my body, and just a lot of other stuff, a lot of indications that it was having a hormonal effect on me, which I know alcohol does typically increase your estrogen as well, because most of the time alcohol comes from estrogenic sources, especially something like beer, which I didn't have that, but still, it tends to do that. So basically, I was really seeing that feeling. And yesterday, I didn't drink anymore because I didn't want to. Because after seeing Charlie, I was like, okay, like I need to kind of tone it down because I need to kind of figure out what I'm doing. Like the concert's over, the show's over, like I'm done, basically. So yesterday, I didn't have anything to drink. And I felt a huge difference throughout the day, going towards the night. I was a lot less extroverted. I was a lot less fake extrovert. I was getting a lot more tired while I was hanging out with Eric and Lisa. And we were like, being all cheesy and stuff. And I was actually the first one in bed and all this stuff. And like today, I was like, I can't really go shopping with you guys. Like I need to kind of chill today, right? It's like, because all of those things go back to normal and those inhibitions go back to normal, which it's not like I did anything crazy. I'm just saying, like, it just feels different. And this morning in particular, I felt so nauseated and I started to feel very depressed. And this feeling like everything was going from everything is romantic to nothing is romantic, nothing at all. And my sense of, like, my appetite went way down. I went to eat the breakfast at the hotel with Eric and Lisa. I ate drastically less than I have been. And I just noticed a huge difference in my mood. I felt very sad. And I felt very, like, almost like I could start crying. And I felt all that inhibition come back and that boredom return, basically, pretty strongly with a vengeance. Now, luckily for me, I do have like some herbs that I take that do help with some of my hormones and stuff. But also I have a B complex, which is really important with drinking, I think too. So I took all my herbs and stuff that I've been using since the winter. And I felt better after. But if I didn't have that, I don't know, And I think about where I was at, like, when I was young. I would have taken that feeling of depression that was coming with the inhibition of eating less. The body trying to be like, oh my gosh. Because what tends to happen is you eat a lot and that serotonin builds in the brain. And that signaling is blunted, and then boom, you stop drinking, and then that signaling comes back with a vengeance. And your body's like, stop eating. Like, your body's like, stop. Like your brain is like, stop it. Holy crap. Like, what is it going to take for you to stop? Basically, that's how your brain is feeling. It's like, this is too much. It's too much. That's what your brain is kind of signaling, but that signal is deafened by drinking. And so when it's done, it comes back with a vengeance, and it can kind of overdo it. Your body can overdo it, and it makes you feel depressed and stuff. And so I just felt the feelings of disgust and stuff, which I think within the toxic ritualistic, especially BINGE, those same serotonin feelings of disgust, they can be transferred to ourselves. And it can become about our being disgusted with the way that we, with our physical form, rather than the food, which is what it should be applied to. That's what your brain is trying to tell you. Your brain isn't telling you to apply it to the mirror. So basically all I did was I took my B vitamins and whatever, and I did what I needed to do. I had like a balanced breakfast, but not too much. I stopped, like I said, but after I ate that breakfast, I was disgusted, which is when I felt kind of depressed and stuff. And I just didn't eat, and then I felt better. I just stopped. And then it started to lift pretty fast. But if I was like 20, what would I have done? I would have either gone into a toxic ritualistic spiral, or I would have thought about something emotional. I would have thought about, oh gosh, well, this is like this, and oh no, and this in my life, and I don't know, because that's the thing too, is sometimes our hormones make us feel a certain way, and then our brains can just run with it, and run and run and run, and we can just come up with all the reasons why we should be feeling sad right now. And I think that happens a lot too. And so what a lot of people would do then is just be like, well, shit, I better have another drink. And I think that can happen very often, and it can become every day for some people if you don't stop it. And while that didn't happen to me, because I do have an awareness of what was going on, I think having an awareness is really important, because it's not about anything other than your body just wants you to stop eating. And so oftentimes I hear a lot of people within the toxic ritualistic say, like, our bodies, oh gosh, set point theory, oh gosh, oh, my body's betraying me, this isn't working, I can't sustain this, I'm just gonna gain it all back, oh my gosh. And it's like, no, it's because you are misapplying your brain's signals. You're not supposed to feel disgusted with yourself. You're supposed to feel disgusted by food because you're full. So you're misapplying that in your brain. I will always say it is a mental illness. There are physical components, there are hormonal components to it, yes, but it comes from the mental side. And so that is why I believe there is a connection between drinking and toxic ritualistic on the binge side. I think that's what happens. So let me know what you think, I guess. That's my theory. It's what I have experienced. And back to normal now. But imagine, right? If I had less awareness, if I had less physical awareness, I don't know what would have happened. That's why I'm talking about it, because I feel like I'm not the only person in the world that this kind of temptation happened to. But I know what the actual feelings are and what they're coming from, and a lot of people misapply it. So I think it needs to be talked about, which is why I am. But anyways, I don't think that will apply to everybody and anybody. I really don't. I think it's within certain contexts, and that's how I feel about a lot of stuff in the mids and in the mid-size phase. I think it's a lot more individual, so I think it's important to consider. But if that's something that resonated, I hope it helped. If it's something that you've observed in someone else, I hope it helps you to understand it, and ultimately I hope it prevents it from becoming a problem for anybody with this problem, because I do think that's why people are at risk, and I think that's the connection. So I will talk to you guys later. Have a good day. Peace.